Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Dr. Sohail Hanif, welcome to another episode in this podcast, and it's been a pleasure having your company, learning about Zakat, learning about National Zakat Foundation. In the previous episode, we spoke about National Zakat Foundation's strategy, vision, mission going forward. There are a few things that we still need to cover, but before that, I wanted to touch upon in this particular episode some of the challenges that faced NZF, and if I can address the elephant in the room, there were some iterations, and every charity has its ups and downs, but I believe NZF went through a time when there was a upheaval in the community, if I can put it that way, in terms of how it was operating and in terms of certain incidents that have happened in 2018. So I'm going to put it to you directly. Was NZF doing things the right way at the time? And we're talking about certain funding of zakat. So when I'm giving you my zakat, I'm entrusting you to be able to spend it, to give it to people that are most in need. So the incidents that have happened in 2018 and the challenges that the organization have faced before that, can you enlighten me a little bit about, and as a reminder to our viewers, what were they about and why was there such an uproar in the community?
Sure, thank you very, very much. So, first of all, we talked in previous episodes that building our community, I should say, is a journey, and it will go through stages. So a project like NZF, it has been through stages. When we first started, we were synonymous with shelters for homeless Muslim women. That was like the flagship project, because we started due to stories of homeless Muslim women in places like Birmingham.
I remember, wasn't it that in West London you even took a building on and had a few rooms to
Correct.
The homelessness issue in our community, especially towards our mothers and sisters?
Correct. We had 3 shelters in the country dedicated to homeless Muslim women. And then after a while, we had a shelter for ex-offenders, people who've come out of prison, just to give them a stop where they can be prepared for the opportunities the world can offer them for work, for training, for how they can plant their feet, so they don't just go back. These projects ran for a while, but then after a number of years, we felt it was not maybe the most cost-effective way to help people. And then we went focusing purely on what I can call holistic supportive applications, meaning applicants come in and we just holistically address their needs, meaning from emergency support, we'd get you from homeless into emergency shelter. You can stay there for 3 days. While you're in shelter, we'll help you apply for a full application. After that, we'll plot your course with you. What do you need? Housing? What does that take? You need training for a job? What does that take? So we literally will take you from wherever you are to where you need to be. That was very, very good. Very hard to scale if you're talking about, really serving Muslims across the country. In 2018, there was an iteration that lasted for about a year and a half, in which NZF was aiming to support people across the whole 8 categories of zakat recipients. There are 8 different types of people who can receive zakat as outlined in Surah At-Tawbah, which is the 9th chapter and its 60th verse. And so there was again, this was built up by years of thinking, just what are the best ways to address these 8 categories of zakat recipient within the UK. So the focus of NZF primarily still remained within the poverty relief and the handheld support, but maybe 20% of the expenditure was then trying to think about new areas. So within the 8 categories of zakat recipient are what the Quran calls fi sabilillah, in the way of God, which in their most classical explanations were people on a war effort, might imply people on a Hajj effort, and they need some sustenance to continue through, which then later on came to mean people in public service. So if you are dedicating your time to serving the community, then you can't be using that time to be earning your living, or at least not as much as you otherwise would. So the community should support you because you're doing important forms of community service, community leadership. And so there was a program, a leadership development program, where people who were on the front line, could be in academia, could be in other forms of community leadership and work, could be in scholarship and teaching, that we would give you zakat money to support you in this project. So you won't have to look elsewhere. There was also, if you're doing community cohesion and da'wah work, then we will support you in your da'wah project and your livelihood, so that you won't have to stop the da'wah. Is that making sense? So there's classical precedent for these interpretations. The problem that happened was just that individuals who were selected as community leaders were then questioned in the community as being, why are they seen as community leaders? Why are these projects seen as good projects for da'wah? Are these the best use of the community's funding? And I think what became very clear was that if you're going to change how you view the purpose of zakat and the output of zakat, you have to take the whole community on that journey with you. Otherwise, you'll lose people on the journey. And that might not happen at the speed that you would like. I'd like to educate quickly. Here's my podcast, here's my book, here's my explanation. Now let's move. But there's this inertia. You've got this whole community of givers, and you have mosque leaders, and you've got scholars, and you've got people who used to recommend you. They weren't educated about this change. They didn't have all those chances to think through what you're doing. And so that's what basically happened. There was critique about who did you support, why did you support with them, why this amount of money. And I think what I personally believe is, if we're going to do selecting scholars to maintain their da'wah through zakat, that can be a divisive strategy, because my scholar will be your deviant. It's very simple as that. I think he's great, but you think, hang on, but he belongs to X group and I don't want him to support. So it can be a very divisive approach. And I believe that the greatest strategic imperative is to make a foundation of support that everyone can feel comfortable with. And that's why even after that year and a half or so, NZF went back to what it always had been, which is helping Muslims who are poor below a nisab with zakat support. And so that's why going forwards, the initiatives I've described, building a foundation for our community, a system where everyone can come on board with, the imperative is, for me, is to use interpretations of Islamic law that everyone feels comfortable with, because the greatest aim, the greatest idea is to create something that every scholar and every group and every mosque feels, this represents me. I think we can do it. I think we have to do it. I've had a lot of success talking to all types of mosques and leaders and high net people and ordinary people and younger people and university people. This message resonates, and I think we have to stick with this message and build a strong foundation. So I'll say there was nothing in my understanding that was against Islamic law, out of Islamic law, or violation of Islamic principles. But Islamic tradition has a spectrum, a spread of opinions. And so some of the spend sat in some of the opinions that were not widely... Exactly. And wasn't that whole build-up wasn't completely there. That's all that happened.
Do you believe that the leadership at the time were wrong in making that decision?
So wrong can be on two levels, right? There's the wrong of you have violated the basic rules of zakat, and I'll say no, I don't believe they were wrong on that. I think there was consultation, there was precedent in what was selected, but strategically...
Scholars, so for example, in NZF you mentioned that you have a scholarly board that advises on things. Were they consulted at the time?
So NZF's history with scholarly boards, in the early years, we worked very closely with the Al-Qalam Sharia panel. And then in that period, and scholarly consultation has always been a part really of how we operate throughout our history. And so all I'll say is that there were several scholars consulted in that period. Not maybe formally in the form of a board, but there was definitely scholarly consultation, scholarly input, scholarly guidance. And so I wouldn't call it invalid, rogue interpretations. However, in my own judgment, I don't think it was the correct way to build this organization or to handle the trust. Why do I say trust? Because one of the scholarly challenges is to theorize the zakat collector. Meaning, as we are operating today, are we independently responsible for deciding what to do with the zakat because we are the zakat institution? That's one answer. Or are we representatives of the givers because they've made us their agents and so we're tied to what they want us to do? Both of these have a precedent in our Islamic legal tradition, and I think this is one of the most important questions to answer. At what stage can an institution move from being an agent to being actually representing the entire community to make decisions, strategic decisions on spend? So I think that lies at the heart of this. What are you? I've spoken to people who tell me I should see NZF on both sides. I've seen some people say, no, you have to decide. You're the leadership. You represent the future of the community. You have this expert representation. And I've seen people on the other side. What I personally prefer is that until we build this national network, wide buy-in, I think we have to see ourselves personally as agents of givers. We have to spend in ways that we've told the givers we would spend. Any change in a strategic direction that's quite different from helping poor Muslims in need, then we have to bring the givers on board because we're dealing with their money. That's how I see it. If we reach a stage of wide adoption, it's a real system and communities from different backgrounds and different sorts of across the country trust us, then I think, yes, we have to start really thinking about how to build a broad coalition of leadership for the future of our community. It's a very delicate topic, I'd say, of quite Islamic. It's a topic from Islamic jurisprudence. It's delicate, and I think it has to be worked through.
Yeah, I think trust is also a delicate word.
Yep.
At the time, I believe you had a few major donors that withdrew their support for National Zakat Foundation. Do you feel that 6 years later, that trust has been rebuilt in some sort of way, or do you think NZF suffered from the fallout of that incident?
What I'd say is that if you look at simple metrics and measures of growth of income, growth of reach, growth of impact, we've grown significantly in every year after that year, basically. And so the community as a whole is increasingly believing in the importance of local need and increasingly entrusting us. And in fact, since that time, over the last 6 years, we've always tried to, again, using technology and governance, to give maximum trust and transparency to what we're doing. You can log online right now, live on our website, go to a feature called Zakat Live. You can enter your postcode. You can find out exactly what we've spent and raised in any part of the country, visible to everybody. As much as we can, we're making everything transparent and visible. Every giver can expect an email to come over the next year to tell them when and where the zakat has gone out. So the commitment has been over the last 6 years to increasingly be as visible, as transparent, as clear as possible. My purpose personally has been and continues to be to build all the bridges across our community. If there are scholars who previously have spoken not favorably about NZF at any stage of its past, I have been, and I plan to continue to meet them, sit with them, talk to them, talk about what we're doing. I know that our message, our purpose, our systems, they have been designed for maximum trust. This is exactly it. Because when I talk about building a nationwide system, we can only do it together. And so that's why I'm saying everything we're doing and deciding is to sit within a space of maximum clarity, adoption, transparency, peace of mind. Scholars across the board should feel comfortable working with us. So that's what we are. That's what we're committed to be. That's what we've always been, really. And like I said, there was just a part of zakat spent in a particular way in the time frame that we've discussed, but it's not our history. And so that's all. And so whatever. So we are. I guess what I'm trying to say is we are building, and whatever trust is lost, I'm actively rebuilding as well from that time.
NZF as an organisation, pre-2018, before the fallout, or before the very public fallout with the organisation, do you believe that NZF has moved on from that time in terms of systems, procedures, leadership, or do you think it's still the same, but we're just doing things better now?
Yeah, so to be clear on two fronts, when we talk about public fallout, you have to actually realize it might not be as big as we think. It goes back to most things. So most things we consume on social media, so often the loudest voices aren't actually the voices that everyone listens to. And so by no stretch would I call this, of maybe the proportion that some people might see it as, because I go regularly, I'm speak to people in Manchester, in Birmingham, in London, people who volunteer, and not everyone knows what all this is about that you and I are talking about right now, right? Yeah. So everything is relative, first of all. So I wouldn't call it that level as well. And like I said, to be very clear,
in terms of rebuilding that trust, I mean, sometimes, something, everyone makes mistakes, and charities
yeah.
are not the perfect vehicle, right? We all make mistakes, but sometimes those mistakes are forgiven, and you rebuild those connections. So has that been the case for NZF, or do you think, as an organisation, we've still got a long way to go?
No, I think we've made great roads to, again, the people who've been affected by this news, who've heard about it, who've been concerned about it, who've been upset by it. I think we've made great roads and inroads into rebuilding, re-educating, remaking people aware. And to make it, again, very, very clear, what we're discussing is particular avenues of spend that lasted that we did for about a year and a half in our 13-year history, of which even in that time it was 10 to 20% of our spend. So we're talking about like 1% of NZF spend in our history. We're not talking about more than that approximate figure.
But what might have seemed like a big
correct
of that money was being spent on
correct
a controversial area.
Correct.
But what you're saying is,
I'm saying just to put it all into context, and so we've not been. So NZF pulled back in 2019 actually back to what it always was, which is helping poor Muslims who are below the nisab with economic upliftment. So that's what we have been, and that's what we are.
Okay. Going forward, in terms of accountability, what are you doing to feedback? I know you mentioned the website and I put my email address and you're going to feedback. But as a donor, if I was to donate to NZF, how do I know that my donation is safe?
Yeah, so there's quite a few things there. Just to reiterate things like you'll get your personalized impact report, you'll get your personalized email to tell you exactly when and where your zakat is distributed, because we keep all funds in a, it's currently a very straightforward queue, first in, first out with donations and with applications. So we just match them and then we'll email you. I would like to develop this further so that the queue is actually a localized queue. So Birmingham zakat is matched with Birmingham recipients, and if there's any surplus, then it's matched with other areas, because I'd like people to feel in a real localized network, which is what we're building, and we're ready to do this now. We have no, because it's building the future of local zakat, because local zakat that deserves the word local, that speaks to what our Islamic sacred law talks about, is localized based on cities, because countries didn't used to exist like this. United Kingdom, fixed borders didn't exist before the Second World War, and it was an idea between the two world wars that we should have fixed countries. So countries are not the unit of localizing, and they're not the unit of solidarity traditionally. What it is, it's your cities and their surroundings. And so when we talk about harnessing the best of our technology, our systems, our advocacy, our mobilizing, our messaging, is to really make people feel, yes, we've got our city covered. Have you got your city covered? Let's help each other. And that's how you build your concentric circles. And we don't think about it just as a country, then yes, Let's help the Muslims in France. They're part of our concentric circles. Let's build this out. That's why we have an NZF in the Netherlands. We have an NZF that just started in Germany, where our vision is not actually UK then. Our vision is localized zakat all over the planet. And we're part of active conversations. I did a tour of New Zealand after Ramadan. I literally was going to mosques, to centers, to universities saying, let's build our local zakat system. By the grace of Allah, I led Friday prayers in the Christchurch Mosque where the shooting happened in New Zealand, South Island. And it resonated with them because they saw firsthand the threat a minority community can be in. And they saw firsthand, they got this welling of support over the 5 years. It's been exactly 5 years since March the 15th this year. But the public support is dying down, financial support. And they've got people who are still affected by trauma, by loss of a loved one, by literally bullet wounds, quite literally. And it resonated with them that we need to make our own network of support and zakat, and they really want to be part of this. They felt very energized by this. And so that's why I'm saying it's not about more work and less work. The message of local zakat, it is the message of the sunnah. We have to expand it in concentric circles. Going back to your question about what can be a trust for a giver, so that there's what I've mentioned. And there's our auditing, like I've said, we get an annual audit with external auditors that feeds into the annual report. You can come download from our website. We've got a monthly Sharia audit, which is internal and that we respond to. And as we work towards developing our local hubs, you have more access points to come and speak to us. Why don't you volunteer? The best way you'll know what people are up to is if you join them. Go to our website, click on the volunteering lab and volunteer. Be part of us and then you'll know us from the inside.
Dr. Sohail, just before we finish this episode, I just wanted to touch upon one element, which is probably the biggest question in every donor's mind, and that is to do with the admin cost. I know every charity has costs associated with running the charity and making sure that accountability is at its highest and nothing comes free. So how do you charge or how do you pay for the services, for example, the 30-odd staff that you have? Where does all this money come from?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we run really quite a lean project. We don't have an office. We have quite, relative to I think others in the same space, we occupy much smaller teams in marketing. Relative to the amount of, I guess, technological development that we do, very small team in technology and so on. Relevant to the finance that we have to do, very small team in finance. So we're quite fortunate to have some very dedicated, very skilled, capable people who believe in what we do. This is the first thing. The second thing is that our main source of income is the gift aid. That's why we really request people to click the gift aid if they are UK taxpayers, because it really is a very important source of support for us and running our organization.
In terms of percentage of your running costs, how much does gift aid help you?
A very large proportion. I mean, if I were to... there's a particular chart I'm trying to revisit, but let's just say it's the bulk of our institutional spend.
70? I don't want you to guess, but okay, we'll take a large.
Yeah, I'll have to do some calculating.
Right.
About 13% of the zakat approximately comes to be gift aid. If the zakat is, let's call it 8 million, 10% will be 800,000. If we then look at a few other costs, so I'd say it can almost come to 50% of all of our costs, basically. Then we do sadaqah fundraising that supports.
When you say sadaqah fundraising, people that are giving
donations, it's not zakat, it's non-zakat funds that we also raise, that we use to support our running costs. We tell people who are looking, that if you give us £1 in zakat, it can help us raise another £1 in sadaqah, it can help us raise up to £8 of zakat. The reason for that is it helps us reach people and get people to pay zakat. So it amplifies basically. We also take riba funds which is people, the money that they shouldn't be consuming by themselves, I mean, for themselves, is their riba. In our sacred law, you're meant to spend it on the needy or on public service projects.
Right.
So we have areas of spend that we use for that. We
What would that look like? Give me an example, please.
Well, it can look like some of our taxes we pay to national insurance and things of that sort. Otherwise, in terms of the policy, because we're running a public service project, then a number of scholars say we can use it in general. But like I said, we have particular areas of spend that we apportion that to. Then we have finally the zakat support cost, which is what we call it, which is from the zakat donation, we give people a choice to either let us use 10% of that to pay for the distribution service, or they cover it with 10% extra from themselves to cover that distribution service. That pays for our grants team, the people who sit and go through the grant application. It pays for some of the related costs from getting the money from you to the recipient. That's the service, the zakat distribution cost. How do we justify that coming from the zakat? Two ways. Some scholars hold that you can take from the zakat to cover this form of administration because the Quran allows for zakat workers to be paid from the zakat. So if you're happy with that interpretation, that's how we're doing it. If you're not happy with that interpretation, why would someone not be happy with something in the Quran? It's because the other camp, if I can call them that, they say that this is really for state-appointed zakat collectors because it's the state which gives the sense of oversight. Many people would say that not all Muslim governments give the best oversight of transparency in the world today, but if we don't go there...
What do you do if you're living in a country where you don't have a Muslim leader?
Yeah. So I'm saying if you don't go there, but you could argue we've got much better transparency here. All our accounts are public. We're audited independently. We're audited by charity commissions. If your argument is one of transparency and responsibility, I think we can do that. Our salaries are benchmarked to not be to fit within what is normal within the sector. So as far as everything goes with what government sponsored zakat collection should be, we kind of tick all of those boxes. But if you ignore that for now, those who say this is only for under a Muslim ruler, which some people say, where we cover that box as well. And the reason how we cover that box is that we are not an agency which takes your money and then looks for poor people to give it to. We represent poor Muslims all of the time. At any one point, we have a live queue of zakat eligible Muslims who have authorized us to represent them. We represent them. So when the giver gives us the zakat, it's by agency of the poor. So they are allowing us to use their zakat as helps us get the money to them. So what I'm trying to say is correct. And so because of that, the zakat is discharged as we receive it. And then the poor recipients have authorized us to collect zakat and spend it in accordance with what will help them and in accordance with our policies. So because we have an agency agreement with our recipients, even if you don't believe we can take it as a collector, then we can take it as representatives of the poor who have authorized us to collect and spend based on their needs and based on our policy. It's a very technical answer, but it's a technical answer that we've developed with scholarly input so that wherever you sit on the spectrum, we can explain and justify with Islamic sacred traditions how we are using and spending this zakat. Last thing I'll say before we close off is that in my understanding, the majority of people who say their zakat is 100%, they still take the cut like this. Why? Because what happens is most charities have an admin cost, which they might declare, but then they have project costs, which are embedded into the project. So let me give you an example. If I'm saying that my zakat is 100% going to give food parcels to a village in Gambia, let's just say. What does the Gambian person receive? It's a food parcel. but embedded within the cost of that parcel is the cost of the lorry driver, the cost of packaging the food. These are all costs, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to say this food parcel, which I gave to this family, it costs £15. The food of it might cost £8. And then the driving of it, the delivery of it, the packaging of it might cost £7. So can you see, it's 100% in as much as I've given all of your zakat, went into a food parcel, but when I cost the parcel, I've added my delivery costs into it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do it. So even many projects that say it's 100% zakat, what they've incorporated within it is project costs, because most of them give zakat in kind, not in cash.
Yeah.
It's when you give zakat in cash is when you'll have to account for this difference. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
So what I've described, which is very transparent, very visible, very discussable, because we can talk about it because we give cash giving, is actually happening in the majority of the cases where people say the zakat is 100%. It's just that we're very explicit about it. That's just want to make that clear.
You know, we've run out of time on this episode, but I just can't help but expand on that.
Yeah, correct.
We're going to extend this episode.
Yeah, sure.
So in terms of what you mentioned there in terms of accountability, because I personally, I don't believe in the 100% policy. That's my personal preference. I'd much rather, if I'm giving money to charity, I'm happy for them to take a portion of it, a reasonable portion, 10, 15%, whatever, because nothing happens for free. Part of the reason is the quality of work. If I give an individual £100 to deliver it, there has to be some sort of accountability. There has to be some sort of a reporting process, some sort of making sure that money is being spent and my money hasn't been robbed by some random person halfway, right? How does National Zakat Foundation make sure that the money that I'm giving as a donor is being spent? What reporting processes do you have to make sure that the donation is not being misused or fraud is not happening by applicants, for example?
Yeah, thank you very much. As I've mentioned, we've got multiple reporting layers. Within them, again, I've mentioned we've got a monthly Sharia audit. We've got an independent Sharia scholar who takes a random sample, assesses our distribution against our zakat policy and escalates concerns that might arise. We've got the annual audit with the independent auditor. We then have these advisory governance boards to whom we give reports, regular reports on money out, money in, feedback. And so what I can say is we've got multiple layers of scrutiny to do our absolute best that we are following all of our policies, that any errors, fraud, which will always crop up, right? People can cheat you, people can deceive you, that we catch them. When we catch them, we respond to them immediately. We have external auditors from our community, meaning if there's a problem, that will bring them in as well to double check. Was it bigger than what we found? And so we really try our hard to make a support system around ourselves that we are, as much as we can, we're airtight, we're honest, we're open, we're transparent, and we ourselves are investigating wherever there might have been an error or a slip in a process. Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I would say, you see, the easy answer is to say no, we don't, because that is the answer. But what I'm trying to say is that finding a slip is the mark of a good system. That's all. Because if I were to say no slip ever, everything is perfect, then do I really know what's going on? Am I really following up on the recipients? Did you see what I mean? It's one of those answers which, as far as I can say, no, slips are very rare. But the fact that we also have an internal within our team to audit cases. The fact that we can sometimes say, actually, this recipient organization, actually, there's a question about it, and we've investigated. The fact that I can say that we've done that recently in the last year, went into investigating an organization that was supporting our recipient. So the fact that I can say, yes, we did internal audit, we checked them, we followed up. The fact that I can say that means we are flagging concerns. We are concerned about third parties we work with. We are concerned that when we work with the mosque that distributes cash to the recipient, did the cash really reach the recipient? The fact that we've got multiple checks, internal, external, and extra external, just shows that we are concerned and we are on top of it. It's very rare, but it happens enough that we can say that we are catching things. No system is, if somebody were to say there's never been a concern and there's never been a fraud and there's never been anything, it probably means they're not checking. This is the truth of it.
I'm glad we addressed the difficult topic of accountability and reporting. So thank you very much, Dr. Sohail. Now, moving on, there is another topic that we're going to speak about in the next episode, and that is the topic of advocacy. How does that fit in, and what does the future look like for National Zakat Foundation, and in terms of the vision that you shared with us in the very beginning of how community and how the whole model of zakat and community fits in, and inshallah we're going to cover a lot of that in the next episode. So Dr. Sohail, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much indeed.